The Kathleen Kennedy retirement drama continues and, in my opinion, just got a little bit ugly. We're going to cover all of that and more in today's video. Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another upload. I don't like to do 2 news videos in quick succession, but I think this story deserves it. And if you're looking for the ordinary lore content, we had a good one yesterday on naval doctrine. Go check it out. So the big Hollywood trades, like The Hollywood Reporter, like Deadline, ran stories earlier this week based on initial reporting by Puck News, stating that Kathleen Kennedy would retire from the head of Lucasfilm by the end of this year. Last night, the woman herself spoke up to clear the record, so to speak. Before we get into this, I think it's important to note that I'm not one of those people who hates Kathleen Kennedy in particular. It's very obvious that Star Wars had some various missteps under her leadership of Lucasfilm, but for me, it's always been hard to attribute those mistakes to her versus the orders on high from Disney, and I tend to believe that many of the issues probably come from Disney's mismanagement. Not to say that she's made no mistakes, but if you go through my past videos, you're not going to see her with laser eyes in the thumbnails. I don't think she's like the source of all evil. I give that context because as someone relatively neutral about the woman, this article today really rubbed me the wrong way. So let's break it down. Mike Fleming Jr. with Deadline had an interview with Kathleen Kennedy. I said it funny like that because this isn't truly an interview. This is a quid pro quo where Kathleen Kennedy gets to unofficially release her statement through, I'm sure, pre-authorized questions, while Deadline gets an exclusive piece on one of the most talked about stories of the week in media. That sort of relationship between studios and trades isn't new, but what bothered me about this article is how it has the air of repudiating the initial news while also running defense of Kennedy and being critical of the initial reporting, which again does seem to be overall accurate. That being said, when Deadline released this article, all the news going around was that, nope, the report is wrong, Kennedy is not retiring. Let's go to the initial Puck News article and read what Matt Baloney said, because I think it's important to know what he claimed and what he didn't claim. I'm going to link the article. It is behind a paywall, so I won't read word for word the whole thing, but it starts off with, "It's happening. After years of speculation and polite urging from observers like me, Kathleen Kennedy has informed Disney as well as friends and associates that she will exit as Lucasfilm president by the end of the year." Not a huge shock, of course. Kennedy will be 72 in June, and the legendary movie producer will have run Lucasfilm for 13 years as George Lucas's hand-picked steward under Disney. It then goes on to discuss what the author sees as some of her failures and accomplishments, and honestly, I think overall a fair assessment. There's not even a whole lot of subjectivity in there. So, to reiterate, the initial claim was that she would be stepping down from the head of Lucasfilm. The new article from Deadline, the interview, opens in honestly a pretty shocking way. I was expecting a fluff piece where she's essentially giving out her talking points, and I think that's common and fine. What I wasn't expecting was the writing from Mike Fleming Jr., who says, "I thought I'd seen it all in trade journalism, but the piranha-like frenzy on Kennedy and the successor speculation that followed Baloney's Puck report is a new one. Baloney for years has been beating on Kennedy like she owes him money, and this week reported Kennedy was retiring. Here she is producing X, Y, and Z with A-list participants." First of all, he did not state that she was retiring. That is objectively untrue. He stated she was stepping down from the role of Lucasfilm head. We'll get back to that in a second, but this really rubbed me the wrong way. I admire Baloney's hustle and ability to turn over hard ground, but his penchant for defining industry people like Kennedy in disparaging ways, well, I just don't understand that. I mean, the article was pretty fair to me. He didn't say she's a bad person. He said she thinks Star Wars under her leadership had some issues, but he also points out, for example, that she's Lucas's hand-picked successor. It's a very short article. Also, let me be crystal clear. Thinking that Kathleen Kennedy has done a bad job is a reasonable and understandable assessment when all the evidence is considered. Whether you personally agree or disagree, I don't get how someone could look at all the evidence and say, your take that Kathleen Kennedy should step down is unreasonable. In other words, fair and rational people can look at reality, can look at the evidence and think she's done a bad job, and they should be allowed to say so. And to me, the writer is looking for a level of deference which honestly isn't journalistic. You can choose to write about someone's successes when they're retiring, but if you think they did a bad job, you're allowed to say that, especially considering, again, the initial interviewer was speaking only to her role as head of Lucasfilm. Anyway, the article continues saying Kennedy is arguably the most successful female producer executive in Hollywood history. She's produced more than 70 films, that Star Wars has been successful, and that, I quote, "Sorry, Matt, the woman is a first ballot Hall of Famer, not someone who deserves to be battered around like a piñata. She also deserves to own her own narrative and demystify this pseudo-drama." Like, are you joking? Someone produces Jurassic Park and you can't report on them as they lead one of the most valuable brands in the world? That's absurd. That's not journalism. I don't know what it is, but it's not journalism. If you think his reporting is irresponsible because it's misinformed or his sources are incorrect, that's fine, but that's not what this article is doing. It's criticizing him for the mere fact of reporting it, while also, through implication, suggesting that his reporting is wrong and thus irresponsible for that reason. And the lengths that this article goes to muddle the waters in that area really, really annoys me. For one, the headline says she's not retiring, while the initial paragraph paints the report from Baloney as discussing her overall retirement. Yet, when you read into the article itself, it essentially confirms that the reporting was correct. Kathleen Kennedy is not retiring and does not plan to retiring from the nebulous role of working in movies. She says, "I will die making movies," and I actually think it's really cool that she's found a lifelong passion that she can be a part of. Hopefully I can do the same. However, while she is continuing to stay at Lucasfilm and to be involved in some way, it's also clear that notwithstanding the fact she'll continue as a producer, she is looking to step down. Kathleen Kennedy says, "We have an amazing bench of people here and we have every intention of making an announcement months or a year down the road. We have every right to make that announcement when we want to make it." That's totally correct. But trades also have the right to report on upcoming major industry news. The interview is also misleading because it never actually asks the key question. Well, were you planning to retire? Is the initial reporting accurate? It's clear that it was. Instead, it hints at the fact that, yeah, she's moving into a producer role, while like softly playing with the accuracy of whether it's exactly in a year or not. Kennedy says, "We'll probably make an announcement months or a year out," regarding how far down the road you expect before a change gets made into her new role. Further, the article says the connotation is you're being pushed aside in need of being replaced, though that's not what I've heard. That's not what I've heard either, and I read the article that this interview is responding to. Matt Baloney says, and I quote, "Kathleen Kennedy has informed Disney that she will exit as Lucasfilm president. Her decision, she's exiting as president, not being forced out of the industry by an angry Mickey Mouse at gunpoint." I don't know, like, I personally would have been very embarrassed to have my name associated with this article. It comes down to groveling, and again, I'm not someone who has a hate on Kathleen Kennedy. You've got a long resume of big movies. It's not uncommon to develop a project with big names who fall out when visions don't align, but they get reported as a big implosion. To act like what's going on with Star Wars, where we've got 5+ movies fully announced, trilogies worth, which are just not going to happen. It's not normal, and I think it's really unfair to put that on overzealous fans reading into things. I wasn't the one who got Patty Jenkins out on a tarmac to advertise a movie which will never be made. I would never deny at all that it's common for something like Star Wars to have projects which fail to launch. Everyone wants to work on Star Wars. Everyone is super busy. I think the Rian Johnson trilogy is a great example of that, where the Knives Out series is completely bonkers successful and he seems to enjoy making it. So while he wanted to return to Star Wars, maybe he'll get a chance, maybe he won't. However, fans have a right to be critical of the fact that they keep announcing things which fail to launch. Let's compare reality and what we heard from Star Wars. In 2020, StarWars.com said Taika Waititi to direct and co-write new Star Wars feature film for theatrical release. Then we look at the statement in the article. Well, I keep waiting for Taika and he's working with another writer. He's so busy. I love him. I think if we ever do get a script from Taika, it's going to be fantastic. Okay. I'm not saying you're wrong for trying. The criticism is, let's not put it out there until we know what's happening, because we're at the point where fans don't get excited for new Star Wars announcements because no one believes they're going to happen. Anyway, one bit I did appreciate was at the end where she says, I've never been an executive. I'm a filmmaker through and through. I approach the executive role as a filmmaker. I loved working with filmmakers. That is my lifeblood. It's what I enjoy more than anything, and it's been really fun. I just think that's an endearing statement, and one that if I were the PR team behind this piece, I would have focused on. Has Lucasfilm made mistakes? Yes. Are some of them Disney's fault? Probably. Are some of them Kathleen Kennedy's fault? Probably. But I think the idea that despite it all, she came at things with the approach of a creative, and maybe even that led to some deficiencies as an executive, that would be a bit of honesty that I would have appreciated if that's the case. But that's my take on the article. Really, really not a big fan of this one. Expect to see Deadline get some scoops though, I guess. Anyway, see you guys next time. Bye-bye.